The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. I am Christina Morris, and I will serve as the administrator for the next hour. You have joined us for our Gaming in Crisis, the Path Back webinar series. We are very excited to have an expert panel to present this information for you. But before we get started, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. First, a brief disclaimer regarding today's presentation. The contents of this presentation are presented for general informational purposes only, and not for the purpose of providing legal advice. You should not consider any information provided to be legal advice and should not act upon any such information without seeking professional counsel. Use of this material and your attendance at this seminar does not create an attorney-client or any other relationship with the moderators, speakers, or panelists. I would now like to take a moment to thank the state associations from Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, and Nevada for coming together to help promote the webinar series to their tens of thousands of employees and members who have been impacted by the world's events. I would also like to thank the Innovation Group, Regulatory Management Counselors, and Global Gaming Business Magazine, who combine their talents and expertise to present a webinar series designed to help gaming companies, including operators, manufacturers, suppliers, as well as executive employees, investors, and customers navigate the new normal as we struggle through and emerge from the devastating effects of the coronavirus pandemic. Throughout the course of the crisis, the Gaming in Crisis webinars are charting the path back for all segments of the industry. Experts in their respective fields will examine each and every impact with opinions and suggestions on how we mitigate those impacts. As the industry moves forward with reopening and welcoming back its employees and customers, it is anticipated the number of operational and logistical issues will arise. TIG, RMC, and GGB will be moderating these issues, and we will be developing future programs based upon timely issues that the industry is facing. Please send all questions and topic suggestions to info@casinowebinar.com. You can also view recordings of our webinars, this current one and past webinars, on casinowebinars.com. To help facilitate efficiently and respect your time, all participants will be on mute during the duration of the event. If at any time you have a question, we would love you to submit it. Please type your question in the questions box on the control panel on the right side of your screen. Please note that today's presentation will be recorded, and the recording will be shared with all attendees after the webinar has concluded. A copy of the recording will also be made available at casinowebinar.com. So now I will turn it over to our moderator today, Mr. Robert Russell.
Thank you, Christina. Before moving into today's program, I wanted to update the context to where our webinar series began and where we are today. Those of you that have followed the series may recall that our original goal was to provide feedback from a diverse industry peer group on how their organizations have been managing through the COVID-19 crisis. As we transition to reopening of casinos across North America, it's important to note that many issues will continue to face the hospitality industry, not only from operational issues, but no doubt from financial pressures as well. I think it's fair to say that the energy put into navigating the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis was not anything the industry wanted to deal with. But as guests are welcome back to the hospitality environment, I think it's fair to say that from our frontline employees to top management, as well as to our partners in the regulatory environment, it has been a process that has illustrated the high degree of integrity that the casino gaming industry operates with. As of today, we have 401 casinos in the United States that remain closed. There are 588 that have opened, or at least opened a percentage of their gaming complex. We are honored today to hear from two top casino executives that have successfully navigated the opening of their respective casinos. I would like to now introduce our speakers and give a little background before handing it over to them today. So Christina, if you can go to our next slide. Kathy George has been in the hospitality industry for over 28 years prior to joining the Firekeepers Casino in 2012 and has been the CEO since 2017. She's responsible for leading a team of over 1,800 members in providing a superior guest service that's offered by the Nottawassippi Huron Band of Potawatomi Indians in Michigan. Prior to joining Firekeepers, Kathy worked for Wyndham Hotels and Hilton Hotels. She also served as the general manager for the Seneca Gaming Corporation in Niagara Falls, New York. Our second presenter today is Mark Bertha, and he's president of Hard Rock Hotel and Casino Sacramento at Fire Mountain. Mark is responsible for the daily operation of one of Northern California's premier gaming, dining, and entertainment destination, which is owned by the Enterprise Rancheria tribe and managed by the Seminole tribe of Florida. Prior to this, Mark was the president of Hard Rock Racino Northfield Park in Ohio, which was recently sold to MGM for north of $1 billion. He led the property up to its acquisition in 2018. Before joining Hard Rock, Mark was vice president and general manager of Stations Casinos in the greater Las Vegas area. Prior to Stations Casino, Mark was president of Soul Casinos in the AVA Amphitheater in Tucson, Arizona. I'd like to thank both Mark and Kathy for taking time during this very busy period with the reopening of their casinos. Mark's going to kick us off today. So with that, Mark, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you, Rob. On behalf of our 1,300 team members, Hard Rock International, and our ownership, the Enterprise Rancheria Tribe, it's truly a pleasure to be with you all today. First and foremost, we all hope that everyone on this call is safe and healthy, and we wish you the best to your families, and your employees during this unprecedented time. You know, in my 25 years of being in management and hospitality and gaming industry, I can unequivocally say this truly is a new normal and absolutely uncharted territory for all of us. You know, for us here in Northern California, 2020 was a story of our business growing strongly. If you can go to the next slide. We had just opened our new hotel casino only 5 months prior, on October 30th, 2019. It's 1,587 slot machines, 57 tables, 169 room hotel, 7 dining establishments, a conference center, and we are located in the greater Sacramento area. And it's funny, during that opening, I even said in a speech that once we open these doors, we would never close again. And so some of my employees remind me of that statement now, because this truly is unprecedented. Within 24 hours of the governor of California's stay-at-home executive order, we had suspended our operations at 5 p.m. on Friday, March 20th. Q1 was a time of learning and growing. Clearly, there were changes going on in our area. We were one of the first areas to be impacted by the COVID-19 situation. So we were starting to implement our new protocols in February and March, even prior to the stay-at-home situation being implemented. So for the last 2 months, we have been temporarily ceasing our operations, and we restarted after our ownership, our corporate office, and our property management, in working with our local counties and our health department, made the decision to restart our operations on May 20th of 2020. Next slide. So as we look at, you know, gaming in crisis, the path back, to me, it's really more like, you know, paving the road forward, because this is really a brand new environment and it will really never be the same as it was. So how do we get from where we were to where we're going in the smartest way? And so if you're familiar with the Hard Rock brand, we're very proud of our 4 mottos, and I've sort of broken today's presentation down into 4 pieces. First is what we call our safe and sound plan, which is, you know, kind of akin to saving the planet, saving all of us. There's a focus on our guests, and we believe in the motto of all is one. There's a focus on our team members, who are clearly here to love all and serve all. And then there's, of course, a focus on our community, and it's about taking time to be kind. And those are our 4 mantras that sort of lead our company and have done so for the past 50 years. And I'm going to sprinkle in some learnings along the way of things that we've experienced that I hope will be of use to others out there. Next slide. So we have a plan called Safe and Sound, and Jim Allen, our chairman, and the Seminole Tribe of Florida had a very clear vision and commitment of what we needed to do going forward before we reopen. And that was literally a mission statement of nothing is more critical to us than the health and safety of our guests and our team members. We had actually developed a 148-page plan using insight and feedback from health experts around the world. Clearly, Hard Rock is an international brand. The CDC, guidance from Ecolab, and state and local officials in each of our jurisdictions. We developed a new set of protocols related to each and every area of our property. We talked about what do you open, because in some cases, certain amenities may not be available initially, from entertainment to potentially buffets and so much more. It's a conversation we have to have. We looked at an occupancy plan. We absolutely focused on a media and messaging program of communications, which is absolutely essential. At the same time, before we reopened, we were focused on team member engagement and how the best way to return to duty would be executed. Staffing plans in a new normal. We weren't quite sure whether we were going to be ahead, at, or below, prior sort of occupancies and revenue numbers. We did an entirely deep clean of our entire property before we reopened to make sure that we had everything ready to go. It was as clean and safe and ready as the day we opened our doors. It was also an opportunity to retool our business and our revenue centers and looking at taking that closure period to hear what our guests have been telling us and retool our business model. We looked at our sponsorships and partnerships, and there was so much more. I mean, literally, this conversation can go on for hours of all the things that we felt we needed to do in order to have these protocols firmly in place prior to welcoming back even our first guest. Next slide. So, I want to give kudos to the Wynn Company and to Matt Maddox for truly being leaders out there and putting out one of the first comprehensive plans and being transparent about it. I think it gave all of us who were working on our own plans, an ability to be out there. So one of the first things we did is send out a abbreviated plan with a message, on our property. This message came from me to all of our database players and our community, and you can see the letter that we wrote. I'm not going to read it to you, but it clearly articulated the fact that we've worked with our communities and with experts and to put a plan in place on behalf of our company and our ownership that we believe would be the best for everybody. And so we knew guests obviously have a short attention span, and so we took that plan and basically created a 8-page digital flip book of key messaging that our guests would, need to know prior to coming back to our property. We emailed that out to our entire database. We posted it on our website, and it provided us with a platform to give our guests, our employees, and the community a better sense of the things that we were doing at the highest level. So if you go to the next slide, we kind of broke it down into different phases of the experience. And so obviously when you arrive to the property, there's going to be things that are going to be different. And, from what I've gathered in reviewing many of the plans and the openings to come, many properties throughout the country and the world are doing very similar things, which is a great testament to our collective vision to take care of our community and our guests and our employees, whenever possible. So some of the things that our guests will basically, be seeing when they arrive is thermal screening. And we're doing non-invasive temperature checks. Obviously, people who have a certain level of temperature are not permitted into the property, and we ask them to work with their health advisors to then, get appropriate attention if it's needed. Guests are required to wear masks. We have made that one of our mandates on our property, and clearly that has been, a process in itself. Not to mention all the hand sanitizers and other amenities that most of us are out there are doing. If you go to the next slide, on the hotel guest side, and again, I'm not going to read everything on here, but, the hotel guest has a similar experience. They're also going to have their temperatures checked. We have a separate entrance for hotel guests that are registered in our building. We're providing them a brief COVID-19 awareness card of some of the protocols and procedures that they're going to be familiar with when they stay in our rooms or spend time on our property to better educate them. One example of that is all reusable collaterals will be removed from our rooms. It's a new hotel experience. It's a new gaming experience, dining, entertainment, and clearly one that our guests are learning as quickly as we are. For instance, in-room dining would be contactless. We're actually leaving the order, knocking on the door, and leaving it for the guest to then roll in. We don't have ice machines available. It's all upon request. We're only allowing 4 guests in an elevator, hotel elevator, and our security is managing those elevators and wiping them down upon each and every use. If you go to the next slide, we have enhanced cleaning procedures, as I'm sure most properties out there do as well. We implemented something called our clean team, and it's something that has gone over very well. It was a great concept developed by Hard Rock International. We have people on the floor in dedicated bright green shirts that are out there incrementally above and beyond our normal staffing, cleaning the property, providing all of the necessary precautionary things to ensure that the experience, again, is clean and safe. And you can see some of the things that we've implemented. We're working very closely with our vendors and distribution partners and suppliers to ensure we have PPE and cleaning supplies, as we'll talk about in a few minutes. There's clearly been an increased need for that across, around the world. The frequency of our cleaning has been increased, and that's something that, is highly important, and it's something that is going to take time, you'll see, for teams to learn and understand and execute. So we're all learning each and every day. If you go to the next page, we've implemented industry-leading cleaning and sanitizing protocols to clean guest rooms and high-touch areas and all areas around our building. In our rooms, our bed linen and laundry is changed daily, obviously, and continues to be washed at high temperatures to ensure, we're providing all the appropriate protocols for a clean and safe environment. One of the bigger challenges, if you go to the next page, is the focus on physical distancing and servicing procedures. And this truly is a new normal. It's interesting because I think guests have already been out in public, whether they've gone to Home Depot or they've gone to their grocery store. And again, it's across the board. Some stores and outlets are requiring these things, some are not. And so when we talk about guest learning, it's taking them some time because the experience and expectation varies from area to area. In our spaces, we have proper physical distancing that we have dictated through signage and through queue, ropes and stanchions and floor markings and team members instructing guests on what to do. Our restaurants and bars, have reduced seating, and that is basically an outcome of the distancing that's required. At the same time, we have slot machines that are turned off in order to provide distancing. We have, in our retail store, a limit on how many people can be in that store at any one time. In our table games, we're requiring the guests to sanitize their hands upon entering or re-entering into a game. And so there's a lot of protocols and things that we put in place that I believe as an industry, as our company, has really raised the bar of expectation to give our guests and our communities and those experts out there a level of protocol and approval because we've raised the bar to such a higher level of expectation. If you go to the next slide, there's other things we've done, including plexiglass shields that we've installed at all of our front of house guest interaction locations. We've separated ATMs and bill breakers and kiosks at our various cash centers. We've basically suspended large group entertainment programming. And in some case, that's an area that, still remains to be determined, as we're not 100% sure when that will be a more acceptable environment, given what our local health experts are advising us, as well as what we see out there in these much larger venues that have challenges with reopening and their protocols. So we're learning and planning and taking one day at a time to determine when those appropriate times will be in place and what the protocols are. Go to the next slide. Hand sanitizers, you can never have enough. We have them distributed evenly within every 20 to 30 feet throughout our entire property. One thing we learned is we had the dispensing units, and we ended up putting out gallon jugs at these locations because of the volume and the need to refill and the demand. And guests have found that to be a very favorable placement to ensure that they have those tools and resources available to them as they move throughout the building and enjoy their experience here at our property. If you go to the next page, on the same token, there's team member responsibilities. And so we do a lot of the same protocols for our team members as we do for our guests. And in some cases, it's equally important, if not more important. And so whether it's temperature checks upon each and every entry into our building, or absolutely enhanced training that we provided prior to opening and then consistently as we've been opened to our team, it's been important to engage them and include them in the conversation to make sure that they understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how to do it effectively. PPE is being worn by all our team members as well. We have provided masks as part of our uniform, and it's something that our team members are required to wear while they're here on our property. In many cases in our front of house, our employees are wearing gloves. And so as you can see, there is a long list of things that we're doing to ensure that we have the appropriate protocols in place. If you go to the next slide, you'll see a quick little kind of Hard Rock style and branding to some of our signage and the things that we're doing out there to give it kind of our own branded look and feel. On the next slide, you'll see some of the things that we're actually doing in sort of a live environment. And I apologize, some of these pictures are a little skewed here, but if you can see it clearly, this is one of our signs we have out there. And so, playing it safe, the following precautionary measures have been put in place, from our safe and sound clean teams throughout the property, to the masks, to the social distancing, to purification systems and hand sanitizing solutions. We have that built in throughout our entire property. On the right side of the slide here, you can see some of our foam boards that are throughout our entire property at all of our entrances that articulate a lot of these measures. When guests were either waiting in line or upon entry, they have the ability to read all of our protocols and ensure that they understand and comply with, and can ask questions prior to entering the building. On the left side, you see our entrance queue at our our casino port cochere with ropes and stanchions, and the slide's a little skewed, but on the ground you can see the social distancing markers, and people are spaced out, every 6 feet to ensure that we have the appropriate distancing in place. If you go to the next slide, in the interior of our building, you can see our slide here that talks about our slot machines are routinely sanitized by our safe and sound clean team. And the clean team is available out there, obviously, to interact with guests and to provide service. You can see the individual on the left side there wearing, one of our shirts, and on the right side, you can see the signage that's out in public spaces that articulates this protocol and heightened level of staffing and security to ensure that we have these protocols being executed. If you go to the next slide, we talk a little bit about reopening nuances, and really, I think this is an opportunity. And again, this could be a full day presentation as we're learning from others and hearing from throughout the industry what's working and what's challenging and how do we raise the bar. But it's really about best practices and learnings. And so, the PPE and sanitizers and supplies, you need to ensure, prior to opening and even after opening, that you have an adequate supply pipeline. We're very fortunate with Hard Rock International that we have a tremendous purchasing team in our corporate office that has been focused on this 24 hours a day, sourcing vendors and ensuring we had a supply pipeline for all of our hotels, casinos, and cafes around the world. And they've done an extraordinary job in making sure that we were coordinating the purchasing, and that, on the property level, our team was coordinating the inventorying and the disbursement of this product, because it goes pretty quickly and it becomes high value. As we all have learned in the new normal now, from toilet paper to other resources, the price of these items and the availability has been challenging in some cases. We fortunately haven't had that issue because we have a strong corporate team that's been focused on this. At the same time, making sure that your systems and your games and your reporting are all functioning properly. They may have been functioning well when you turned, off everything upon closure, and then upon reopening, it's important that you make sure that these systems and tools are all working. Wastewater treatment plant is something we're learning that, it's important. We have disposable locations for masks and gloves. You want to make sure they don't end up in that wastewater treatment plant or elsewhere, because people need to be basically servicing and disposing these units appropriately. Signage and advertising, internally and externally, it's important to make sure that the message is out there. And you can see from these pictures, ensuring that we have these protocols all throughout our property. And then working with the media and through communications to ensure that people are aware of what we're doing and how we're doing it. If you go to the next slide, I get into the guest side. All is one is our focus. In our market, you should probably anticipate, and probably in many others, that there will be pent-up demand. People have been on the sidelines for weeks, if not months, and missing out on one of their favorite experiences, which is a hospitality experience and entertainment destinations that we have all around the world. And so obviously the markets will vary depending on local and regional and destination. But we are seeing already the economy starting to rebound and the markets, growing. Line cues and distancing markers are things that clearly guests have to learn and understand. The temperature screenings, the signage. One thing I want to focus on is building occupancies. One good learning from that is we put a system in place that gives us an updated count of the number of people in our building exiting and entering every 15 minutes. This was essential for us to understand. But even with that tool in place and with the knowledge of what our staffing and what our occupancy needed to be, you really needed to watch the building and make sure that you had, the right number of people in there at the right amount of time, because people are circulating at all times. 99% or more of our guests understood, complied, and appreciated the efforts that we're putting in place. Most people understand. They don't have a problem with it. But you have to have those communications in place to make sure that people know what to expect, before they get here and as they enter the building. Compliance is required. Making sure that guests and team members understand it and are consistent is clearly critical. And then depending on the location, probably having police support, at least initially, is not a bad idea, just to make sure that there's a presence and an ability to manage crowds and others appropriately. If you go to the next slide, programming. Obviously, you'll want to look at what promotions and activities. Do you do them? Do you not do them? Which ones do you do when you reopen? It's a conversation that is something that's essential, because it's just not turning back on the marketing that you had, because certain things may be acceptable and may not be in this new normal. One thing many properties are doing is bringing people in for a VIP event prior. Gives you an ability to test run your programs and protocols, and also bring in your better players, your VIPs, for that opportunity to get a sneak peek. Again, being forward and outward with what is available and what's not is important, because the experience has changed depending on what you have available and what you don't. In our case, we used our ballroom for operations as opposed to entertainment or functions. We had our players club in there. We had overflow team member cafeteria due to social distancing. We had some offices in there due to social distancing, and we were able to effectively utilize our ballroom, in this new normal. And then guest feedback program. Obviously, people are going to have feedback. It's important to be out there listening. If you go to the next slide, with our team members out there, clearly loving all and serving all, it's been a long time since they rocked and rolled. Even though they may have been out, for 30 to 60 days, we made sure we focused on continued engagement during this time period. And in some cases, some employees were able to come back and some were not. And you need to be aware of that. Clearly, there's an allure of unemployment right now, and there's obviously the need to have multiple revenue and staffing models available depending on what your business looks like when you do reopen your doors. At the end of the day, we're all in this together. Training was absolutely critical. We spent an inordinate amount of training time with all of our employees prior to opening to ensure they understood, to give them time to ask questions and get answers, training our clean team. Some of these protocols take a little bit longer to learn. We made sure that we had our senior leadership on the floor participating in, supporting, and executing at all times. go to the next slide. One thing that I thought was really important is thanking your employees. Bill Marriott, who I had the pleasure of working with for a while, said if you take care of your employees, they take care of the guests, and everything else takes care of itself. And quite honestly, it's important. We did a lot of things to make sure that we're recognizing and spotlighting our team members. Our chairman of Hard Rock International implemented a program along with the Seminole Tribe of Florida to ensure that while we were closed and even when we were open, we were providing grocery gift cards to our team members, many of them who have been hit, hardest by this crisis during the closure time periods, making sure that we're taking care of employees even when our doors were not open to guests. And then finally, we get into the community on the next slide, and it's about taking time to be kind. We have a strong leadership and a strong presence with our Enterprise Rancheria Tribal Council and our ownership. Combined with our management and our corporate office, we were in constant contact with our tribal liaison with the governor, the NIGC, our Yuba Sutter health officials, constantly looking for feedback and guidance throughout this entire process, and I think that's critical. One call out I'd like to make is, I think in Northern California, we have a really unique set of leaders here at the various properties, and we actually established a consortium of sorts of gaming leaders, and you can see the list from Thunder Valley to Red Hawk, Cache Creek, Grayton, Colusa, Rolling Hills, Jackson, Harrah's, and Black Oak. We all came together, and although we know we compete with each other, we talked during the closure periods and even as we started to reopen about what were the protocols we were putting in place for the greater good of our communities, to make sure that we were as consistent with expectations and programming, and to help learn and work together to make sure we were all doing the right thing. And that's something I kudos to everybody that works at those properties for having the confidence to do that and to be focused on what's best for everybody. And then in the community on the next slide, it's important that, again, we take care of our community. You can see all the things that we did as a property through our ownership and our management. And then there were things with Hard Rock International that we did to make sure we were taking care of the community even while we were closed, because it truly was a take time to be kind opportunity. And so in conclusion, on the next slide, we're all in uncharted waters. We're all faced with new challenges and opportunities going forward. Nobody's done this before. There's no right or wrong question or answer. I think the most important thing is to learn as we go along and be proactive as opposed to being reactive as much as we can. And then to plan today, because it will change tomorrow. Important to have your leadership and your ownership aligned. And most importantly, the worst of times often brings out the best in people. And so I want to thank you all for the opportunity to provide a little guidance. And so on that note, I'll turn it back over to Rob.
Thanks, Mark. Great presentation. I do want to note to all of our attendees, we will be sharing this full slide deck in a PDF format to you. Before we jump over to Kathy's presentation, a couple questions came in, Mark, that I'm going to pose to you before we move over. One of our attendees came in with the question of, can you explain how you're managing the cleaning of machines and monitoring when players are leaving, just the operational logistics there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number of tools that we've got in place. Clearly having our clean teams on the floor was part of that protocol, ensuring that we have, members of our team out on the floor monitoring these games and looking for opportunities, whether it's people in the pits interacting and seeing in the moment, or our clean teams and slot teams on the floor, supervising. Working with Scientific Games, who's our vendor, to ensure we've got tools in place to monitor these games. And then, one thing that we did was a good practice is we broke up our floor into zones, and we had our senior leadership team out there managing the floor and keeping eyes on the floor to ensure that, not only were our protocols being executed, but that we were out there working with our slot teams and gaming teams and beverage teams and cleaning teams and EVS, to live up to the expectations that we've established.
Great. One final question before we go over to Kathy is, how about managing the social distancing? You indicated in your presentation you've had a high level of compliance, but Any advice related to those customers that might not be showing social distancing, especially after they begin maybe going and visiting one of the local bars? Any suggestions that you've got?
Yeah, I mean, you can never go wrong, as our Chief Operating Officer, John Lucas, would say. You never, if you have enough signage, take another second look because you don't have enough. I think signage and floor markers and line cues and really having your teams well trained out there and, you know, being consistent and being compliant. We didn't get any pushback from our guests when we advised them. And again, their experiences are different depending on where they are, you know, in a retail location, at a restaurant, at a store, wherever outside of our buildings. And so they're learning from location to location. But I think having those signage tools in place and ensuring that our teams and our management are out there to re-educate and just to guide guests in a heavy presence is absolutely critical. But again, we had no real pushback at all with our guests that were in the building.
Okay, great. Well, the questions keep coming in. We've got over 190 people on the program, which is great. And I encourage you to send in the questions. And if we can't field them all, we will work with our presenters to get some of the highlighted questions. So, Kathy, you're up. And just a reminder for the group, Kathy runs the Firekeepers Casino in Michigan. It is a first-class resort destination in the middle of the state. Kathy manages a staff of over 1,800 employees. So, Kathy, thank you for your time today, and we look forward to your comments.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. So to get started, if we go to the next slide. As you mentioned, Firekeepers Casino Hotel, we're in Battle Creek, Michigan. So we're about 2 hours west of Detroit and 2 hours east of Chicago. We are owned and operated by the Nottawasepi Huron Band of the Potawatomi. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary in August of last year. We continued to have record numbers, including the first quarter of 20. So we've had a very great experience here in Michigan in gaming. Just to give a little background, we did have an expansion in December of 12, opening with our first hotel and additional food and beverage outlets. We broke ground in 19 for a second expansion with new hotel and amenities, which obviously stopped construction in March of 20, and we just restarted at the end of May with construction. We don't have a new projected opening day. We're still waiting on some suppliers to make sure we have everything we need, but construction did commence when the governor allowed us to do so 3 weeks ago. And in addition to Tri-Bones, another Quality Inn hotel next to the casino, we operate at the Fire Hub, which is a restaurant for charity, as well as we operate and built a food pantry there at the Fire Hub, as well as a greenhouse and a community garden. So that's what we've been working on, getting all of these things back open. We did close on March 16th after the governor had closed really everybody down. And then we reopened on May 29th for a soft opening. Mark had mentioned that, you know, some people did different tiers and things. We did that. We invited our top 2 tiers of players. We did not turn anyone else away that did show up during that time, but we didn't advertise that. We wanted to keep it a little bit smaller so we could test all of the protocols and make sure everything was working great. We did do a public reopening on June 1st, and we stated that it was at noon. And I'll talk about that a little bit in another slide. I think probably one of the most important things was working with everybody, you know, talking to those who opened earlier. As Mark mentioned, Wynn, I think everyone has their program, but we, you know, I was able to speak with some people in Mississippi and Atlantic City. So it was a great communication. We learned a lot by talking to them. Also, working with our gaming commission was invaluable to us. They understood what we were facing, and they really worked amazingly well to help us overcome anything. If we needed secondary or third job code positions to make
the staff be able to change their duties and help fill in gaps. They were truly great partners. They came to all of our operations meetings that we had for the month prior to opening, and literally were here with us hand in hand to assist however they could during the reopening out on the floor. So, our props to our gaming commission is amazing. Of course, CDC, the health department. Our local health department has been wonderful to work with. We don't obviously report to them or to the state in terms of all of the different investigations or anything, but they worked with us. They gave us some help in terms of some training. But really, once they saw our plans, they publicly came out and said that, we are very prepared. We're more than prepared to open, and that they are going to help. Our plans and our actions will help the rest of Calhoun County open. So I think that was just a great partnership, and I encourage everyone to kind of do that and work with their health departments, because right now I think they can make or break us on certain days. So it's been great to work with them. And Mark had mentioned working with the local police and even the state police here just to help with traffic control, which really ended up, we only needed once, so it's been good so far. And per the guidance of the state, and we're looking at a goal of 50% occupancy across the property. So that's what our goal was in setting up all of our plans and actions. If we could have the next slide, please. So some of the changes that we had to do, we did go through health inspections after all of our deep cleans again, but we did it during the soft opening, but we also did it again during the day of the regular opening, and they've come back since, and it's really been a great help just to make sure that the entire eyes are on us, since the state was still under a stay-at-home order. All the eyes were on us to see how things were going, so we welcomed all the additional inspections. A lot of people, just as we have used our slot systems and other systems to come up with our occupancy, and we've done that just as Hard Rock has. We get it every 15 minutes. So security used it. So when we were the first week, we looked at it and said when we got to 80%, we would close the drives down to prevent overcrowding. What we found that during the week, 80% worked, but on the weekends, we really needed to go 70 to 75%. And so we're still playing with that, but we did not want to get overcrowded. One of my personal biggest fears was opening and having the lines that I saw at other places on TV, because I know that the state and the county just didn't, that's what was making everyone the most nervous. So you wanted this number, and it really helped us. If we could use the next slide. So one of the things we did, the limiting the points of entry to 2. So just like everybody else, I'm sure there's many entries. So we just have one on the hotel side and one on the casino side. And, we separated the exits and the entrances just as all the CDC and everyone recommends. And so the temperature checks were put into place in our plans. We are doing them using a handheld temporal gun. We did order the kiosks where the guests would operate them. They would just walk by and it would take care of it, but they're still not here. So we just kind of had to adjust that and use the guns, but it's a very quick process, so it's working very well. And then valet being closed, obviously we don't want them in other people's cars. What we did do is we brought them all back anyhow and are using them as welcoming staff, opening the doors, helping, reminding with the face coverings, really kind of like the ambassadors that they were doing anyhow before. They just aren't parking the car, but they're still helping with wheelchairs and getting the bellmen. So I think that was a good part of the operation, is bringing our valet team back. Of course, the property is currently non-smoking for both employees and guests, since everyone has to wear a face covering and they have to get temperature checked. So that has actually gone much better than I had anticipated. So we'll see how that continues to go. There is a smoking section outside for guests, but they do have to obviously come back and forth in the building and get temperature checked after it. The social distancing that, Mark and everyone is talking about, we kind of did what everyone else did. Our slots are spaced out, moved banks. Since our poker room did not reopen at the start, we did add slot machines to the poker room. And then since we are in construction, we were already making moves at the gaming floor, so we just kind of sped that up a little bit. And so now, during all of this social distancing, we won't have to change again for construction. We did add the cleaning ambassador program. I know everyone has a different name for it, but the different color shirts. And what we were able to do is we were able to bring back a number of employees from other departments that were still on furloughs, offering them to come back to get back to work and be these ambassadors. And it's really been a great tool for us because they're answering a lot of questions of our guests and just providing that extra hospitality in a time where maybe things are taking a little bit longer or people are just getting adapted to wearing masks or face coverings. So those ambassadors are really helping. Next slide, please. Everyone's spacing our table games differently, having 3 and 4 chairs at a table, and every other table is empty currently. So we're going to continue to work on that. Obviously, some of the tables are getting full, but we haven't had any major problems so far of people arguing about that. The food and beverage outlets, just closing the food court and the buffet. But we are taking steps. We look forward to opening the buffet up the beginning of July. We're putting a lot of different changes in for that to occur. All the rest of the outlets have opened with 50% of the seating, kind of doing what everyone else is doing in terms of removing everything off the tables and utilizing some technology to help us with the ordering, et cetera. And then all staff in the building went through training. I can't specify, give our serve safe trainers that we have in-house the props for doing a lot of the training, as well as Ecolab came in and did training to everybody. And then they also have an online portion that every employee had to go through. And then our risk management team also at that same session came in and discussed the face coverings, how to remove them, et cetera. So as Mark said, the training that you can give, it's worth every penny at the end of the day. So one of the changes that I would do differently is the 3-day soft opening. It was helpful for the team to adjust to working with face coverings and changes in their job duties from sanitizing tables, and we just added in some staff into so many locations that it really changed some of their jobs. So we wanted to get them practice. In hindsight, 2 days would have been sufficient, but then we got rolling on the 1st, so we jumped right back in. As I mentioned, the big concern was the lines. So one of the things that we did, that we advertised that we were opening at 11 on the 1st, but really we started letting them in at any time after 8 a.m. So we never encountered that huge line that it could have happened. It was a constant flow. It never stopped, so we were able to keep them spaced. And I think that really helped at the opening, and that people recognized it. And I think they've just changed their patterns. Speaking with our 3rd shift, especially here, they will definitely say, and looking at the numbers, the business has changed. People have learned, they have to come at different times if they'd like to play the games that they want to. So it's really spread the whole length of our day out dramatically, but it's also alleviating any lines. So we're really happy with the decision to just let them come in so the lines didn't get created, because the TV cameras were here waiting for the lines. So it was good to not have those. The next slide, please. I did mention the non-smoking, the employees. I said it was during phase 1. We have not made a decision what we're going to do after that. Team dining room, we also did what Mark did. We are using our ballroom for extra seating, as well as an in-house conference room for that. We did lower the price of the food. It's no longer a buffet style, but it's actually a great product. And it's less waste. So we're excited about. We're probably going to keep continuing that. And then I guess that's, if we go forward on the slide. really it. More breaks. We did find out we knew we'd have to give some more breaks to some people, but we've actually built into everyone's schedules additional breaks and allowing them to have water bottles at their workstations with them because of the face coverings being so warm out on the floor. And then I already talked about our gaming commission, but I would recommend everyone try to work with that because being able to shuffle people around the building and help where needed has been amazingly helpful to us and to our guests. Next slide, please. As employees were called back from furlough, unless they had a medical note, they had to come back from furlough. And if they didn't, then they would forfeit their position and they can reapply later. Most everyone has returned those, so that hasn't really been an issue. Other than the huge increase in FMLA cases, I will say that that's probably increased dramatically. That's the only side effect we've had so far. But overall, the guest satisfaction is high, employee engagement and satisfaction is high. And as Mark said, that pent-up demand has certainly driven revenues and EBITDA in the first 10 days we've been open. And really, we're just continuing daily to work towards our goal of being a little bit better every day. You know, one of the things we always working for our tribe is adhering to the 7 grandfathers' teachings, you know, of love, respect, bravery, truth, honesty, humility, and wisdom. And between our executive team, but really everybody, we've worked across the property to incorporate that every day into how we operate Firekeepers, but especially during this time with the change, with all the changes that we have to do through this unprecedented times. So everywhere you go on property, even our guests are aware of the 7 grandfather teachings and, you know, how we've treated our employees during the furlough and being able to really take care of them has made them all want to come back to help take care of our guests so that the tribe benefits from that. So I really, we've had a very good reopening and, if we can ever help, we'd be happy to. I guess I didn't put it in there, but Mark had talked about the community and I wanted to talk about that. You know, one of our pillars is really giving back to the community and being that steward. And since we do have the food pantry, we were able to keep that open while we were closed to service, unfortunately, thousands of people in the town that needed assistance during this time. But now we're able to get back into our marketing events. Like our LPGA event is going to happen in July. Our NASCAR event, we're still waiting on when it's getting reassigned to a different date. But really, we're just working on all that's going to come together to continue to give back to the community because that's really important to, not just the numbers of the building, but it shows the heart of our team. And, hopefully everyone else that's waiting to open gets to go back to their goals of helping in their communities as well. But really, that's all I have at this time, so I can take any questions.
Thank you, Kathy. Great presentation and very, you provided some real world examples. Our questions continue to come in and I encourage those on the line to send those in and we'll field them in the next 10 minutes or so. I want to go to something you talked about, Kathy. You indicated that player behavior, you've seen some changes that your third shift has been observing. Can you talk a little bit about, what was the biggest surprise? You've given us that, but outside of the player times that they're visiting, what are you seeing on frequency? What are you seeing on time on device and various other aspects that might be enlightening to those that haven't opened with the new behavior that you're seeing in your players?
Sure. In addition to increasing, obviously, the length of the gaming day, really, but I'll say the spend has increased dramatically. The coin in and the drops on tables is, on most days has been more than double what we were seeing before at the same time last year when we had the whole floor open. I think the pent-up demand of people being in their homes for 3 months and literally in Michigan not really being released yet until this week. I think it just has it's changed their behavior. They're just spending more, but they're also enjoying it. I mean, just as Mark said, we expected a lot more pushback on the face coverings and the non-smoking, and we really haven't had many, I'll say. So it's just changed in terms of their overall spend, which has been fantastic. The hotel, is full, so we're definitely continuing to get the guests back in.
That's great. Mark, remind me as the position that your property has taken on smoking during this phase. We've got a question from our speakers for both of you. I know that the Huron Band is in phase 1 limited that, but how are you handling smoking with your guests?
Yeah, so we are still allowing it only in controlled environments. So you have to be in a socially distanced space in order to do that. And so, when it comes to the face mask, whether you're dining or drinking, you have to be in a space in order to take your mask off, whether you're sitting at your machine and distanced or whether you're sitting at a dining table and distanced appropriately. At that point, you can then engage in those, relative activities. Again, once you've met the protocol of being in a space that is distanced.
Kathy, you want to supplement that as well from your perspective?
Sure. The smoking, since everyone has to wear a face covering, we just decided it was best to go non-smoking. Well, the safety hazard of them lighting their mask on fire. But I think it's just helping, everybody breathing. It's hard to breathe smoke, even if it's not you, they're next to you and you have a face covering on. So we're just trying to look out for the overall general public. And again, we look forward to, if it changes, we'll enact that. But right now we're just listening to what the state and the CDC are recommending.
Okay, great. We've talked a lot about the guest, and we've also talked about the employee. What obstacles have you seen on the employee front? We'll start with you, Mark, and then pose the same question to you, Kathy.
Yeah, I mean, there haven't really been obstacles. I think, clearly everybody's aware of the unemployment that's available, and, people were on it. We made a commitment to take care of our team through payroll and PTO and other, options that they had available through the entire closure period. But, in coming back, some people are ready and some are not. And we have, you have to have a program in place to address that, because once you open your doors, you need people here to service the guests, of course. I think the only thing is making sure that you put in the appropriate amount of time for training. And I think Kathy mentioned that as well. I mean, it's absolutely critical, whether it's, a couple hours up to 2 or 3 days, in some cases, in our instances, where people needed to have that deep level of training and actually going out and practicing some of these protocols on the gaming floor, in a hotel room, wherever, to ensure that they understood it, that we were looking for things that may be inefficient or ineffective, and to have answers in place and appropriate consistency before you do have your guests start back in the building. And so those are the things. I don't think they were pushback. I think they were more just, examples of learning as you go with your team.
Yeah, I would agree with Mark. There hasn't been a great deal of pushback. I think it's just managing the changes and getting people comfortable with wearing a face covering while being a bar back and pushing beer, and just the harder jobs with their face covering. So it's been very good. I think we're definitely in a great situation here where, because the tribe is always taking care of our employees so well, including covering their benefits the entire time they were off, and just different things, that the employees really wanted to come back and are very appreciative. So it's been, for us, we haven't had a great deal with that. I guess one thing, if I were to say, is a lot of questions have come up recently about, as opposed to a cloth face covering that's recommended, is some people want to wear shields, but the recommendation comes back that if you wear a shield, you still have to wear a face covering. So that's not really working. So we're working through a couple instances of that, but really We haven't had much pushback at all from any of the employees.
Great. Well, Christina, can you take us to our next slide here? And as we close out the program, I want to thank both Mark and Kathy for the transparency that they shared. The program was very much appreciated, and I know that our attendees appreciate it as well. Final slide, if you can bring that up, Christina. So this is the 7th program we've had in our series. We do plan to continue to monitor issues. Obviously, global gaming business and the innovation group are out front monitoring issues as they arise. I do encourage our attendees to send us topics that you'd like us to dive into. We have been honored to work with a wonderful group of presenters during these 7 programs, as well as the state associations. And so as we all continue to find a new normal and stay healthy and provide the great hospitality environments, we know issues will arise. So please stay tuned. Visit casinowebinar.com for future programs, as well as feel free to send us any topics that you think we should focus on. With that, I encourage everybody to have a wonderful rest of the day. And Kathy and Mark, thanks for your time.
Thank you.